Currently, it's 64 degrees in Portland, high of 66 today, low of 48. Beautiful blue sky day out there. Saturday, we've got a 50% chance of rain, highs of 61, lows of 54. Sunday, the sun will return. 68 is a high and 46 is a low.
Driving, 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 music's blaring in my ears. Engines roaring, 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 horizons drawing near. Pedal to the floor, no more feet in the door. Gonna drive right out of this bitter night.
Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I have worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years, and in those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services and benefits to our community we sometimes take for granted. This is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or of USM. Today we have Chris Franklin, Executive Director of the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust. Welcome, Chris.
How you doing, David?
Good. How are you today?
Excellent.
So, just a little trivia piece right now. We offer the weather to every guest that comes in here, and almost everyone has said they wanted to do the weather. I don't know what it is.
Day like today, it's not hard.
Right. You did a great job. So, how would you, or if you had to meet somebody on the street and you had to describe the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust, how would you describe it to them?
I'd say, we're a local land conservation organization, so we're trying to preserve lands that are special to our community. And we do that by engaging our community in educational activities, walks on our properties, but also in the literal protection of land by purchasing it or purchasing deed restrictions on the land and taking care of the land through our stewardship programs.
Do you find that I happen to live in Cape, and I'm impressed with the work that you do and the amount of properties that you're involved with. But do you find that Cape has a high percentage of land trust properties compared to other communities?
I think so. Maybe, we have 29 properties now. Cape's a really small town, and I like to say that it's not a mistake that there's so much, or accident that there's so much land, that I think as a whole community, the culture of the town, I think, has been very involved in land use matters for a long time. Being an agricultural community, having access to land has always been a part of the town.
A couple of months ago, we had Whit here from the Midcoast Heritage Trust. And how does the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust differ from the MCHT?
Yeah, they were formed a bit earlier, but they're a statewide organization, mostly dealing with coastals communities and lands. And I think ours is different in that we are not, and I guess Maine Coast Heritage Trust is moving this way as well, but we're not just looking at lands that are wilderness or wildlife or habitat. We're not a wilderness trust, we're a land trust, and the lands we're looking to protect are agricultural lands, are lands that people walk on, are lands that may have some historic or cultural significance to the community. And so it's a really wide variety of lands, but we're firmly integrated with one town, whereas Maine Coast Heritage Trust is really dealing with a region.
And if the community members in whatever community they live in, and there's a lot of land trusts in the state of Maine, it seems like almost every town or city has one or two at times. A lot of land trusts are putting their properties out there for recreational use, correct?
Generally public access, all projects we do need to have some measurable public benefit to them, and public access can be that, preservation of habitat can be that. So there's a lot of different ways you can measure public benefit, but I think one of the ones that's most tangible to people is preserving a trail or a pond that they skate on, or a sledding hill, or a place that they've spent outside with their family or friends.
And does the land trust itself coordinate programs to use the land?
We do. We do owl walks. This weekend alone, we have a mushroom foraging workshop at Robinson Woods. We have a canning seminar put on by one of our board members who's a master canner, and so she'll be canning with Ann Carney, so Canning with Carney this week coming up. We also have a new program on the Great Pond, which is a 125-acre pond in Cape Elizabeth. Raf Adams from SOPO SUP, the stand-up board, has started doing paddle birding instead of paddle boarding. So you take binoculars and you go around Great Pond and you do bird watching from a paddleboard.
Wow, I haven't heard of that one. I might have to try that one out. Are there some specific roadblocks, barriers that small land trusts have, especially when it's within a specific community?
Time. Time and money. I mean, I really think that those are our biggest obstacles. That the working with families to preserve their land is something that's incredibly complex, not only legally and logistically, but emotionally. I mean, the families' connection to their land is something that it's hard to give up, and I think that's why there are more land trusts in Maine per capita than anywhere else in the country, is because it's been settled for so long that a lot of our land is still private land, and a lot of that land's been in the same family for generations. We did a project last year on 63 acres, adding to our Robinson Woods Preserve. That property over the 250 years of Cape Elizabeth has been in two families. It was in the Jordan family, and then the Robinsons married the Jordans, and the family passed that way. And so for a family to even sell their rights to that land, I mean, their family obviously has a huge connection to that land, a long history with that land, and so it's a serious conversation.
So do you find that the families still stay involved even after they sell the land?
Some do, some don't. Some pass it on because they feel they're not capable of maintaining it the way that it needs to be taken care of. Some may not be living in Maine anymore. Others, it's important to notice that our projects, some the land trust will own outright and some are still owned by the private landowner, but we place a deed restriction on the property that protects the property in perpetuity against certain uses, mostly commercial and residential development. So one of our easement properties, the owner has a Christmas tree farm on the property. So the land is protected from development. It has trails and some areas that are protected for wildlife, but it's also a working farm.
So you're using a vocabulary that I had to learn recently. Easement. What does that mean?
A lot of people use the bundle of sticks analogy, but any property has a deed, which is the ownership history and certain restrictions on that property. And you can place deed restrictions on your own property without the involvement of anyone else. And a deed restriction might be that the property can't be subdivided, or the property, certain things can or can't happen, or have to happen or can't happen on the property. When a land trust gets involved or a conservation organization gets involved, we assume some of those rights. And so in the case of a conservation easement, the restrictions placed on the property are monitored by the land trust to ensure that in some areas it's you can't clear the trees. In others, it's you can't have motorized use of the property. But the landowner also gets a series of reserved rights, so they're able to continue farming the property. They continue to sell the property if they want. So it's those deed restrictions that we codify through a conservation easement.
And if a property owner comes to you and says they want to work with you about either contributing or selling or providing easements, do you automatically say yes, or is it a selective process?
No, we say no to a lot more projects than we say yes to, because when we take on the responsibility of caring for a property, even if it's donated to us, that has a consequence both in terms of time and money. These are agreements that are in perpetuity, and so on our books, on our balance sheet, the conservation easements, a lot of organizations will carry them as a liability and not an asset because of the responsibility that they carry. But it's also an opportunity for us to engage the community, to manage those lands in a way that dovetails with our mission.
I attended one of your lectures, and I did listen. And CAPE is kind of unusual because you gave a percentage of properties that are protected, and it seemed fairly high.
Yeah, but, well, Cape Elizabeth, already has two state parks, and it has Fort Williams when we were founded in 1985. But in 1985, those are the only conservation lands in existence. But since then, the town has acquired a number of open space parcels through their subdivision ordinance, so that in Cape Elizabeth, if you develop in a certain part of town, you need to set aside 45% of the net acreage as open space that the town will then manage, or the land trust will then manage. So a lot of land has been acquired that way, and the land trust has about 690 acres so far on 29 properties. So we are careful about the properties we take on, but we also recognize that there's still more work to be done. I mean, we have a long list of
Right.
properties on our wish list, but it's getting close to 15% of Cape Elizabeth that's protected in one way or another.
Is that high or low for an average community?
I think it's relatively high.
Okay. And the 40% that a developer has to put away for open space or commit to open space, is that on the high side or low side?
I think Cape Elizabeth's been fairly progressive in terms of their wetlands protections, in terms of their zoning, and trying to have defined growth areas and defined areas that they would rather not see growth. So the town, through its zoning, can provide incentive for certain areas to be developed and disincentive for others. And it's a bit of a debate in terms of whether the areas we want to protect should be placed in the growth area so that we know that at least half of them will be saved, or whether we should try to keep them out of the areas that we're encouraging development.
So you need to have a strong partnership with the community leadership and the town elected officials for this type of work.
Right, and in being a small town that has a town council, I think the emphasis changes from time to time, but overall, the town has a really great track record of when it finds a project that we're working on that serves their goals, they join on as a partner financially and otherwise. And likewise, when the town is looking at projects or management issues, we try to be a resource to them.
Great. So at our halfway point, I do this every week. I ask a trivia question. You were not given the question beforehand, and sometimes it's related to what we're talking about, and sometimes it's not. So today's trivia question is, where and how many acres is the largest conserved acreage in the state of Maine? So we'll get your answer after the midpoint identifier. This is WMPG, and I'm David Unger, host of Nonprofit Insider. Today we have Chris Franklin, Executive Director of the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust. It's your turn.
Oh, right now? So I would say I'm going to go with Baxter State Park.
Okay. Moosehead Lake region is the second largest easement in U.S. history, as it connects 2 million acres of woods, waters, and mountains now conserved for wildlife, recreation, and forestry. So,
Aware of the project. When canoeing in the Debs Connects this spring.
okay. And actually, I did a great canoe trip this spring with my boy, with one of my sons, and a couple of other father's sons, and it was a great area to do it in. Let's talk a little bit about the structure, the nonprofit itself. You talked about time and money being two of the biggest issues. Let's talk about the time. What are some of the things that you struggle with?
I think, in a small nonprofit with 2 full-time staff members, actually we're one 30-hour, one full-time staff member now.
That's you and somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
That there are many hats, from writing the newsletters to balancing the budget to organizing stewardship on our properties to negotiating with landowners to having membership strategies and materials to coordinating education programs. It's way, way, way more work than we could possibly do as 2 people, and that's where the nonprofit board comes in. And any nonprofit director will tell you that their board is their most important asset, and that's certainly the case with us, that we've been really blessed with board members who come on board really wanting to get involved and bring a lot of talent and a lot of time toward our mission, and that without that we wouldn't be able to do half of what we do.
Is fundraising in a small community a difficult obstacle to overcome? Because your community's limited.
It is, and people joke, that Cape Elizabeth and fundraising, it's a no-brainer. But the truth is, that while it's a affluent community, a lot of the community members are involved in different organizations. During the 2008 economic downturn, we really saw that, and I saw in myself that, where I might write a small check to 4, 5, 6, 7 organizations a year, it sort of went down to 2 or 3. And so you really needed to be on that list. And so I think, we try to maintain communication with our supporters, both large donors and small donors.
And you do a very good job with that.
Oh, thanks. Just because in the end, our work is about our community. It's about those relationships. And really, our work won't mean as much in the future if there isn't that next generation or people to replace those of us who are doing it now, be they new board members, be they new staff members, be they new volunteers. Unless we keep the work that we do relevant, it's going to be hard to sustain. And so that's really the mission, is sending the message of sustaining the work, and the money tends to follow.
You do a fair amount of cooperative programming with the schools too, don't you?
Yes, we do. So we'll be starting
okay,
up.
let's tell us about it.
So we'll be starting up again. So we approached this in a way that we wanted to use our properties as an educational resource for the community. And rather than packaging a curriculum and trying to sell it to the schools, not literally,
right,
but figuratively, that we went to the schools and asked which grade level, which team leaders were interested in co-developing curriculum. And the 4th grade teachers jumped to the front of the line. And so for the past 8 years, we've had a program where the 4th graders go out for 2 hours in the fall, 2 hours in the winter, 2 hours in the spring to Robinson Woods. They were already learning about the nutrient cycle, about the water cycle, about animal adaptation, and their core curriculum at the schools. And so we just provided a means to teach that through hands-on activities at one of our properties. And it's my favorite part of the program are the thank you notes we get from the kids, or, the little drawings of the fox and the trees. And we now, 8 years in, have a whole workbook that we give them that's part diary, part sketchbook, part animal tracks and facts and figures, so they can take that home, share it with their friends and family, and it's something that they get to continue their learning outside of school.
And then in the spring, you have a program with some of the upper grades, right?
Yeah, so we have a trail work day with the 8th graders, and so you get 120 8th graders who each come out for 3 hours. That's it's 360 hours of trail work that I don't need to do.
Right, and hopefully the mulch gets to the right place.
Or maybe it's more like 150 hours, because they're not always the most efficient. But but it's important for the kids to get out there, and we try to look at our education programs as developing an awareness of the resources that we protect. The stewardship programs to foster a sense of responsibility and involvement with those properties. And hopefully that all translates to a generation that will have an interest in carrying on this work in the future.
If you had to tell somebody why they should contribute to the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust, what would you tell them?
Well, when you say contribute, I
Dollars,
don't. Well,
cash,
exactly,
cash,
because
cash.
I don't always think that. Because it's either time, treasure, or talent are the 3 things you look for. And some people have money, some people have time, some people have talent.
We're talking cash here.
Well, because our time is limited. Cape Elizabeth's about to celebrate its 250th anniversary, and just jump ahead another 250 years for a 500-year span of Cape Elizabeth. And there's going to be a 50-year period right in the middle of that 500 years where all the local land conservation happened. And people are going to look back to this generation, to this point in history, and say, thank God those people did that work when they could.
But what would you do with the money?
Well, we use money for land acquisitions, but we also use money to engage landowners who might not be able to afford a wetland delineation, who might not be able to afford an appraisal or a survey. And so that if it's a promising enough project, we can invest money into the project to see if it has legs, to see whether or not this project, which we have identified as a top priority, to do what we can to forward that conversation. Because until you get to a certain point with all the facts and all the figures, it's really hard for people to make that decision. And if that's a barrier, then we can use that money to forward some projects that otherwise, might never happen. But also, it's about maintaining this momentum. It's about maintaining this relationship with the community. It's about engaging our community in this work, not because it's good for us as an organization, but because the community benefits in so many ways from having these lands.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Okay.
If you had one favorite project, program, etc., what would it be?
I think right now I've been thinking a lot about the Jordan Farm project over on Wells Road, which is a project which actually concluded the first year that I worked for the Land Trust. And that was purchase of development rights on 47 acres of farmland that at the time we did that project, there were 3 generations of the family working there. The family's been working that land for 5 or 6 generations. It's one of those iconic small Maine farms, and lots of farmers in Maine are forced, their retirement plan is the land that they're sitting on. And this project brought nearly $1 million of capital, some from the state, some from the local residents, some from the federal government. We got $700,000 from the federal government on that project. That was ultimately in the hands of the family for them to reinvest into their farm being more viable. And the preservation of farm land is a misnomer because it's really the preservation of farms. And unless you provide a way for those farms to be viable, protecting all the land there won't matter. And so with that capital, they were able to reinvest in their farm stand. They now have a restaurant, The Well, which is on the grounds of the farm and serves produce from the farm and local meats and local seafood. It's a phenomenal opportunity, in the local foods movement to actually have a restaurant on a farm. They've started a small landscaping business. So all those things are investments in the viability of that as a farm to make sure that it has a welcome place in our community.
So besides just protecting the land itself, you're protecting the whole concept of farming.
Right. And, much in the way that preserving an area of great natural beauty, unless you help people appreciate that, and unless you foster that sense of responsibility, you're not really realizing the full potential of what that property could be.
Do you have any questions for me?
Well, I guess I've been seeing a trend here in Maine towards integrating communities into the work we do and trying to make the work we do more relevant to a wider audience, as it were, and not just the bird watchers and the hikers.
Right.
But you just from your, I know you work with a lot of land trusts. Is that something you're seeing nationwide?
Yeah, we're seeing it, and they're getting involved in more programming, which is kind of nice. So we have a lot of land trusts on my Facebook page. So just following what they do on a day-to-day basis, from having community. I think it's I'm going to get this wrong. The Mount Grace. I'm pretty sure it was Mount Grace Land Trust in Massachusetts. They had a major camping program. So they had a family camp out, which was really nice. And I'm seeing a lot of more intergenerational programming. Mm-hmm. So, when they're able to bring the grandparents and the grandchildren together to enjoy the resources of the farms and the beauty of it and things like that.
That's great.
So I am seeing a lot of that, and it's kind of nice. I just got our cue from Deb Danger here. And if someone wanted to contact you, how would they do that?
The best way, my favorite way, is to walk in our office. We're at 330 Ocean House Road in Cape Elizabeth. One of us is there most of the time. Sometimes we're out on the trails and meetings. So you can call ahead, 767-6054. You can look us up online at the capelandtrust.org, and that will direct you to all the other means of following us and getting involved.
And if there's a car in the parking lot, that means that someone's in the office.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful office set nestled in the woods there. It's really, really nice. Well, Chris, thank you for being on the show.
No, it's great to come in.
Well, and hopefully your work will continue and land trusts across the country will continue to grow and thrive. So next week is kind of unusual. It's Begathon week, and Deb's in the background cheering already.
Begathon, Begathon, Begathon.
And I'm going to try and keep some sort of semblance of a show here next week. But
Good luck with that.
I know it could be very difficult because next week's guest will be Dale Robin Goodman.
Woo!
And Dale is the development director of WMPG, and you've heard her on various shows. But we're going to take a little different approach to this. Besides the interruptions for
Begging.
and what number would they have to call?
Well, right now they can just go on our website, wmpg.org, and click that big bad donate button.
Okay, but we will try and have some sort of seriousness to the show because I think it's important for people to understand the inner workings of WMPG as a nonprofit itself. So hopefully Dale Robin will be able to provide that insight for us. And so stick tuned to next week because it will be
Begathon, Begathon.
with Dale Robin. So the music appears courtesy. Are you ready, Deb?
Yes, I'm always ready,
Okay.
except when I'm not.
Okay. The music appears courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find it on www.michaelhubbardmusic.com. Check out Mike's website to see where he's playing this weekend. Thanks to Deb Danger, NPI's executive engineer. You can catch Deb on Morning Street Fridays at 6:30 in the morning. If you know of a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net. And past shows are archived at www.tcmgr.com, Nonprofit Insider tab. Until Begathon.
Yeah, and don't forget to stay tuned for Zuki Rusi coming up in 2 minutes.
I've grown too big for tourist towns. Yeah, I might leave a few friends behind, but these waits are time.